Joining me now is John Swartz, senior tech reporter with Market Watch. And John, Meta lost a tremendous amount of value today. The historic price drop. Obvious question is why, and I'm sure there's not just one reason.
I don't know how much time you have to discuss it, but I mean, it was a catastrophic series of events. There's a laundry list of business pressures that are really hurting this company. And for the first time, I'm starting to hear people from Wall Street have some doubts and see some vulnerabilities in what Mark Zuckerberg's doing. So I'll go over a laundry list, a couple of things. There's the rise of TikTok, which is basically cleaning Meta's clock with the younger audiences. There are privacy changes that are being made by Apple on its iOS, which makes it harder for advertisers to track customers. And as a consequence, those advertisers are leaving Facebook and going to Google. There are the macroeconomic constraints. And then probably the most ominous thing is there's this big operating loss from the metaverse division of Facebook, which is $3.3 billion. So the future is pegged on metaverse, yet that's going to be a big money loser for the next few quarters.
Yeah, I want to get to that in a second, but first I want you to explain more about the impact of what Apple did in regards to privacy. Facebook saying the tracking transparency feature could decrease its ad sales by $10 billion?
That is correct. That's correct. So Facebook's CFO, Dave Wehner, mentioned that twice. At first, people thought it was he misspoke. But basically, Apple's privacy restrictions, which are essentially aimed primarily at Meta, make it harder to track consumers who view ads. So consequently, what's happening, what analysts believe is happening, is that those same advertisers are leaking away from Facebook and going towards Google, which coincidentally has a deal with Apple, which saves itself from that scrutiny. There's also belief that, well, here's something that happened with Facebook. For the first time, sequentially, they lost users worldwide. They actually lost users, which has never happened before. And the thought is that TikTok is killing them with the younger audience. Snap is actually eating away at them. Google as well. So that impacts advertising as well on top of the Apple situation. So Dave Wehner was asked specifically by an analyst, did you really mean $10 billion? And how did you get to that number? And Wehner said, that's my estimate for the year. So it could actually be worse.
Wow. So did Apple specifically target Facebook in doing this? Why?
Yes, that's not a secret, actually. There's a lot of animosity between Apple and Meta. For years, they've had two entirely different approaches to selling. So Apple doesn't rely as much on personal data to get advertising because advertising is a very, very small percentage of their business. Most of it is from the iPhone and from the Apple services and the App Store. Facebook, 99% of their revenue is from advertising. So they need to get as good a profile of the consumers as they possibly can to sell advertising. That gets them repeatedly in trouble. And Apple has made it maybe a part of their marketing campaign for the last couple of years, starting with Tim Cook on down, to point this out. I wrote about this in Barron's about a year or two ago. And the idea is that they have totally different approaches and they see each other as main competitors. So Apple's going to double down on the privacy restrictions. That has always helped it in terms of marketing itself against Facebook. And now Meta finds itself in this really difficult situation. I think it's going to get worse.
So investing in this new future, the virtual reality future of Meta, extremely expensive, obviously, but don't investors kind of expect that, or does the huge drop show they're not really impressed with this future?
Well, so one of Facebook's earliest investors, a guy named David Sachs, said in hindsight, he said this on Twitter, David Sachs said, in hindsight, Facebook rebranding itself as Metaverse to emphasize its more speculative money-losing division was a peak bubble indicator. So basically what he's saying is Facebook has made this pivot. They want to be a different type of company, but the type of company they want to be and in the market they want to be has been in development in this virtual reality world for years. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time. And when you look at how much money Facebook spent in the last quarter on this division, it was $4 billion. And the profit of the sales were $877 million. The math is not working out right now. So there's this belief that, okay, they're moving to the metaverse, but when's the metaverse going to be ready? I mean, remember Second Life? That was years ago. This is the same type of approach they want to take. And it's not going to happen overnight.
So how does Facebook or Meta recover from a day like today?
Well, I mean, invariably what will happen, and I think it's happened before with Facebook, whenever something happens to them and they have a big trade-off. And today, by the way, was, I think, their worst trading day ever. They were down
Yeah.
26%. They lost basically $200 billion in market value. Invariably, short sellers will come in and they will buy the stock tomorrow. So I wouldn't be surprised if the stock's actually up tomorrow in the next few days and they recoup some of that loss, because they'll see the opportunity. I mean, it's still, no matter what you think of the company, they bring in an inordinate amount of revenue from advertising. I mean, it's $100 billion in sales last year. First time they topped $100 billion. So they're not going to the poorhouse, but for the first time in a long time, they are very vulnerable.
So I guess bottom line for those of us who aren't as inside as the investors are and you, what does it mean to the average Facebook user?
Well, I think the average Facebook user is spending less time on the site. I think there's some concerns about their privacy. I think there are concerns about being hacked. I've had at least 4 friends whose accounts have been broken into, because here's what the hackers do. They're like the bank robbers. They go where the information and where the money is. So Facebook is continuously under assault in terms of security. I think it's an older company. I mean, in a sense, the technology started out as something for 20-somethings or even people in college, which is what Zuckerberg started it as. And its audience has gotten progressively older, significantly older. And I think the younger people have just bypassed Facebook. They're going to TikTok. They're going to perhaps even to Snap. I think what Facebook needs to do is they are doing the right thing. They are pivoting to a different type of business, but it's going to take time and it's going to take patience. I mean, they're not going to lose several billion people overnight from their service. It's addictive. I know they know that. So they'll keep people, but they're not going to be as engaged as they were before, and they're not going to add as many people as they have before, and they're not going to be able to drill deeper into their advertising data because of Apple.
John, thanks so much. I always appreciate the insight.
Sure, thanks.